الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Last week we talked about the issues of Aqidah that are included in that topic. So when we say if we're going to study Aqidah or this is a book about Aqidah, what are the things that might be in there? And we talked a little bit about all the things that would be included and what's the most important or what's the basis of those things and why we're starting with that. So we said that the most basic part of Aqidah is Tawheed, so following Tawheed and staying away from shirk. And this is why we chose this small risala, because it's very basic and it gives you the most basic aspects of the Aqidah of the Muslimin. And these are aspects that don't even fall, if someone contradicts them, they don't even fall into aspects of bid'ah. They actually fall out of the fold of Islam. Because these are the most basic things. So if someone doesn't have Tawheed or they have shirk, then they're not Muslim. So this isn't a matter of, to say that this person wouldn't be from Ahl Sunnah or this person's a mubtada' or anything like that. We would say this person's actually left the fold of Islam and he's not a Muslim or he's a kafir or however you want to phrase, what this person is. But the fact of the matter is they're not Muslim. So this is why we started with this. And last week, Brother Jamal read it for us, and we see that it's two aspects. So the first is the thing that must be done by the Muslim. So that he must have Tawheed or act upon Tawheed, and that he must encourage upon that, and that he must have his wilayah for it, or his forming his allegiances are based upon Tawheed, and that the fourth is that he declares to be a disbeliever the people who don't have Tawheed, and then that the second aspect was the opposite of that. So staying away from shirk and encouraging or warning people against falling into that, and having bara'ah or disavowment from the people who fall into shirk, and then the fourth part was and declaring the people who do it to be non-Muslim or to be kuffar. And last week the Imâm who wrote this, he mentioned the evidence for this or for all of these which is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنْ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ, or that we have sent in every ummah a messenger with the message to worship Allah and avoid the taghut. And we talked last week about what is the taghut. And the taghut is anything that's worshipped other than Allah and is pleased with it, or they're followed other than Allah in a way that would only be befitting for Allah to be followed, or the commands of Allah to be followed, or the commands of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be followed, or that they're obeyed in a way that's at that level. And we talked about that, and we talked about what is Islam, and that Islam is something that's inward and outward, that someone isn't Muslim if they only believe in their heart, and that also they wouldn't be Muslim if they perform all of the actions on their outward with their body and their tongue, but they don't believe in it in their heart. This would be the munafiqeen. And then we also talked about the people who believe on the inside but don't follow it on the outside. This is similar to Quraysh in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and also like Fir'aun and his people, and we talked about some of the evidences for this as well. So inshallah this week we'll go on to the third point from the first half of the risala, which is wilayah, or making allegiance, or it's translated here as having friendship based upon this, so based upon Tawheed. So this is what inshallah we'll talk about today, and then depending on how much time we have, we'll maybe get into the fourth point, which is declaring to be a non-Muslim or to be a kafir, someone who doesn't follow Tawheed. So the third point is making wilayah for its sake, or having allegiance for the sake of Tawheed. And the evidence for this is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ, or that the mu'minun, or the believing men and women, are the allies of each other, or allies of one another. And this is from Surah At-Tawbah 71. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and the believers are nothing else but brothers, so make reconciliation between your brothers. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called the believers to be brothers. So He specified specific people that they are brothers. So He mentioned that it's the believers. So this is a refutation or a rejection or a declaration of that everything, right? Anything that is stated to be a brotherhood other than Iman is something that's false. So people who state that brotherhood is based upon humanity, or brotherhood is based upon nationality, or your race or your language or anything like this, we know that based upon this verse, all these things are completely rejected. That if someone has this tie with you, regardless of whether they have no other ties with you, then it doesn't really matter. If they have the tie of Iman with you, then everything else is irrelevant at that point. We don't say that someone who is a believer is your brother because he's a believer, but the ones who speak your language are a little bit more of your brothers, or the ones who are from the same skin color or from the same nationality or anything like this, that they have any sort of higher status than anyone else. And likewise is the opposite. So if we say that someone isn't your brother, or you have no tie with him because he's a disbeliever, then we don't say, yeah, they're all disbelievers, but the Arabi ones aren't as bad, or that the ones from Lebanon aren't as bad, or the ones from Palestine aren't as bad, or the ones who are fighting the Yahud aren't as bad. None of these things in and of themselves have a tie to what your allegiance is with the Muslimin. Yes, there are disbelievers who are worse than others. That's a separate issue, but that would be coming back to, again, the Islamic ties. So they haven't contradicted Islam as much as the others, so that's why they wouldn't be as far, or you wouldn't, you might say, well, they're not as bad as someone else, or that type of thing. But as far as the language and the nationality and the land and all these things, they have absolutely no bearing on what tie or what love or what allegiance you have with these people. So this can all be taken from when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. So He specified the believers for this. And another point to talk about with this is, what are the believers in this verse? The believers in this verse are obviously the Muslimin. Some people will try to say that the believers are anyone who believe in anything. But this was obviously false, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse to the Prophet ﷺ, who was calling the Muslimin to Tawheed and fighting against, or calling against, the shirk which Quraysh had believed in. And they believed in Allah, and they believed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was present and that He created everything, and they actually worshipped Him. They had their own form of salat, they used to give sadaqah, they used to perform hajj in their own way, all of these things. So obviously we wouldn't understand from this, like some people claim nowadays, that what's meant by it is anyone who believes in Allah. And just like that. Yes, you always have to believe in Allah, but you believe in Allah the correct way that makes you a Muslim, and you perform the actions that keep you in Islam, and you don't perform anything that take you out of Islam. So this is what's meant by the verse. And inshallah we'll get a lot more into that when we talk specifically about which things are shirk and which things are a condition for someone to be Muslim, what actions, and that's a whole other discussion. But for now we're just talking about the general foundation of Muslimin and Kuffar, or Islam and Kufr, and the wilaya, or the allegiance that's based upon this.
Sorry, what's the verses in?
Al-Hujurat 10. Yeah, Al-Hujurat verse 10. Sorry, I forgot. You guys want me to do that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, هُوَ الَّذِي أَيَّدَكَ بِنَصْرِهِ وَبِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ لَوْ أَنفَقْتَ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا مَا أَلَّفْتَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ أَلَّفَ بَيْنَهُمْ إِنَّهُ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, He is the one who has supported you with His help and with the mu'mineen, and He has united their hearts. And if you had spent all that is in the earth, you could not have united their hearts, but Allah has united them. Certainly He is Almighty, all-wise. And this is Surah Al-Anfal 62-63. So here we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking about Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj. And these were two people who were in Jahiliyyah from the greatest of enemies, despite the fact that they were from the same place. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala joined between their hearts, it was with the sending of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it wasn't with the fact that they're from the same place of Yathrib, and that they were both from the Arab, or they both spoke Arabi, or they're both from the Arabian Peninsula. None of this had mattered before Islam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala united them through sending the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to them, and that they were united upon Islam. So we see here that he didn't say that, it was never mentioned, you're from the same town, or you speak the same language, why are you fighting, or anything like this. It was, when Islam came to them, this was the thing that united them, and the other stuff was already present, but it didn't help. And this is what we can see from this verse, that that their wilayah, or their understanding was, so they put away all of the enmity and hatred and fighting and everything that had went before, solely for the sake of Islam, which is something that should be done nowadays. So, if someone, you have a good relationship with them before, but then they leave Islam, or then they start insulting Islam, then all these other things shouldn't matter that was done before. And likewise the opposite. If you have someone who you fought with and you had no relationship with, and they were they used to steal from you or whatever, and then they become Muslim, all that stuff, as much as humanly possible, should be thrown away. There might remain some stuff in your heart that you find difficult to get rid of, but technically it shouldn't matter, and we should strive as much as possible, because if we look at how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were with each other, when Islam came, this is how they dealt with these matters. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and hold fast all of you together to the rope of Allah, and do not divide, or do not fall into division. So from this verse, this is another thing that you often hear, and they'll say that we shouldn't fall into division, or we shouldn't dispute things, or Muslimin aren't supposed to dispute, and they should always have they shouldn't argue with each other, and don't rock the boat, or don't make a problem, or you don't want to say something to somebody that's going to make them mad, when you're trying to tell them about something good or to stop something bad. And very often they'll refer to the issue of unity and say that we're supposed to be united, and we're not supposed to have any division. And yes, this is right, but what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us to be united upon? بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا, or to be upon, all of us to be upon the rope of Allah. And what is the rope of Allah? Depending on the tafsir that you look at, it could be many different things. It can be the Quran, it can be Islam, it can be the Sunnah, it can be the Prophet ﷺ, it can be many different things. But the point of it is that this unity should be upon the Quran and the Sunnah. So if someone comes and says, you're not, you telling someone not to do this, you're making a problem and you're making division. Well, you know what? This is a division that's accepted in Islam, and it's a division that should be done, because we're supposed to be bringing people back to the rope of Allah. So if you're not you're not holding on to the rope of Allah, then really it doesn't matter. You've already fallen into division. This is the most basic division, or the most basic dispute, is to go away from the rope of Allah, or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Yeah.
So what's the verse was that?
Ali Imran 103. So this idea that the division should be fought against, regardless of what the division is for, or that the unity should be something that's sought after regardless of what we're giving up for this unity. This is something that's completely false. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to be united upon the rope of Allah, this is or holding on to the rope of Allah is what should be the thing that unites us. It shouldn't be that we're united and then that's us being upon the rope of Allah. It's actually the opposite. So if everyone held on to the rope of Allah, then they would be united upon this. So does that make sense?
Yes, sorry, I just want to ask a question.
Yeah.
So, okay, we unite under the rope of Allah, yani al-haq. So if somebody is not on al-haq, whether they give themselves the title of Muslim or not, we don't apply this ayah towards them. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Right? We don't say that we have to unite with them. We kind of,
it depends.
We have to cause the...
Well, we would declare what batil they're on up to the level. So if they left Islam, then we wouldn't even deal with them as Muslimin. If they were still on Islam, but they had fallen into acts of bid'ah, and they've contradicted the Sunnah and that, then we would give them our wilayah based upon how much their obedience is to Allah and their following of the Sunnah is. So someone who followed everything would have complete allegiance and wilayah, and someone who had less, then he would have a little bit less of this wilayah, just like our love for a Muslim. The more someone follows the Sunnah, the more love we have for them.
So if you have for example, a sect,
yeah,
that they fell into, for example, shirk, then we treat them like kuffar.
We'll get into the different sects, but just in general for now, what we'd say is that when someone is Muslim, then we give them the basic wilayah of that they're Muslim, and then after that, depending on how far they follow the Sunnah, that would be our how far we go after that with our wilayah and our love for them.
But then like you said, we wouldn't just say okay, never mind, I don't want to jump ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. So how are we defining a Muslim? Like someone who just does the basics, Arkan al-Islam al-Khamsa, and let's say someone, like a lot of people don't pray these days.
Yeah.
Like we try to give da'wah, but we're not really sure how to deal with them. And in what category are they? Are they still Muslims just because they say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah? Or like are these the kind of people who, if we don't want to, we want to tell them, even though we're gonna cause some trouble, but tell them you have to pray, otherwise you're not Muslim. Is that the type of people we should talk to?
For now, we'll get into the ruling on leaving any of the Arkan al-Islam and this inshallah very soon. But for now, we would say anyone who says they're Muslim and you don't openly see something that they do that takes them out of Islam, and you don't know that has been clarified to them, then you would treat them as a Muslim. Just for now, inshallah, we'll get further into it. But for the basic rule we could use for now, someone who claims Islam and you don't have a clear evidence that they've left Islam, then you treat them as a Muslim, and we'll leave it at that for now. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. And or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and work together or help each other in goodness and taqwa or piety, and do not work together or help each other in الإثم والعدوان, or sinfulness and transgression. And this is from Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 2. So here we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to work together for these things. So, and what is the greatest act of birr is tawheed. So the greatest act that someone can do that's pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and is that He commanded us to do, is acts of tawheed. And the greatest acts of shirk, of ithm and udwan, are acts of shirk. So we see here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordering us to deal with each other and help each other with something wasn't based upon anything except for the acts itself. And that the acts that the person are doing is what what we help them with, or what we see. Do we work with this person in something or not? It's based upon whether what they're doing is good or whether what they're doing is bad. It has nothing to do with their familial relations to you, or their nationality or anything like this. It all comes back to their actions that they're committing. And this doesn't mean that we wouldn't be good to our family if they're not Muslim. This is a separate issue. But the point of it is, when we're good to our family who isn't Muslim, the point of it is, or the reason why we're doing it is because Islam has told us to do it, and because we want them to become Muslim. It has nothing to do with it's not in and of itself that we're doing these things just because they're our family. It's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to do these things and to treat them well and to make da'wah to them and to not disobey them in something or to not disobey them, to obey them in something that's disobedience to Allah, and to obey them in things that aren't disobedience to Allah, and so on. So we see here that this is another verse that can be used to show that what is the tie, or what is the relationship between people, that it's based upon their actions, and whether their actions are good or evil. And with regards to some other things that's just important to mention is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke in the Quran, and He spoke about the earlier nations who, before the Prophet ﷺ, so the nation of Isa and the nation of Musa and other nations, He spoke about these people and what they did, and their iman and their acts, their good deeds, and the trials that they faced in calling the people to Islam. And despite that, these people were divided by their land. So some people were in Sham, some people were in Iraq, and some people were in Egypt, and some people might not know exactly where they were from. And we also know that there are prophets and messengers that weren't mentioned in the Quran, that we don't know what lands they were in, but we know that every nation had received a messenger, either directly or that their message stayed within the people for the people after them to receive it. After Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about these people and their trials and their stories, he said, إِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُونَ. Or verily, this is your ummah, one ummah, and I am your Lord, so worship me. And this is, off the top of my head, I don't know which verse this is. So it's Surah Al-Anbiya 92. So here we see that despite these people not being in the same time, and they weren't from the same place, and we know for a fact that they were speaking different languages, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them one ummah. So what greater thing can we say that when we see that they were divided by centuries and sometimes maybe even a millennia, and they were divided by oceans or seas and rivers and all this stuff, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them one ummah. But the people who they were calling to Islam, they were considered their enemies. And they were considered the people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them to call to Islam because they weren't Muslim, or in certain aspects they were to fight them, in certain aspects they were to flee from them, either leaving their lands or whatever the case may be, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished them once the Muslimin left. So we see here that despite living in the same area, speaking the same language, having ties, we know even Nuh alayhi salatu wassalam and Lut alayhi salatu wassalam, their wives who lived in their houses and were actually married to them, they weren't even from the same ummah, technically. I mean, maybe linguistically you might say that they were, both from this they spoke this language, or they were this nationality, or whatever you want to call it. But in the end, these things didn't benefit them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called us that they are from our ummah and we're from their ummah. إِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. So we see that we are closer to Nuh than we are to our cousins who aren't Muslim, despite the fact that, we've never met him, we don't know specifically where he was, where he died, anything like this. Yeah.
So the word ummah only refers to the Muslims then? The Muslim people, right?
Here when he says أُنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ, it's referring that all these people who had this message and had this struggle and who were following La ilaha illallah, we're all in the same ummah. Yeah. And we see also there's a story in which the companions were out fighting, or they were in a battle. And there's a hadith from Jabir ibn Abdullah that he said, كنا في غزاة فكسع رجل من المهاجرين رجلا من الأنصار فقال الأنصاري يا للأنصار وقال المهاجري يا للمهاجرين فسمعه الله رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ما هذا؟ قالوا كسع رجل من المهاجرين رجلا من الأنصار فقال الأنصاري يا للأنصار وقال المهاجري يا للمهاجرين فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم دعوها فإنها منتنة. Or that from Jabir ibn Abdullah that he said that we were out in a battle and a man from the Muhajirin hit a man from the Ansar. So the Ansari said, "O Ansar, gather around." And the Muhajiri said, "O Muhajirin, gather around." So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam hear it. So meaning he wasn't close, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let him hear it. So he came out and he said, "What is going on?" So they said, "A man from the Muhajirin hit a man from the Ansar." And then the one said, "O Muhajirin, come or gather around, O Ansar, gather around." So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Da'uha فإنها muntina," or abandon this because it is something that's putrid, or it's the similar to what like if there's a dead body, when something's just rotten and disgusting. When the Prophet ﷺ heard this, he said to abandon this because it's putrid, or it's filthy. So we see from this that we know that the word muhajirin, where did it come from? It's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He called the muhajirin. So this is a shari'i title that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He gave specific rewards for the muhajirin. And we even from the aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah, the muhajirin have a place that's special. We even say that when it comes to who's the best, Abu Bakr and then Umar and then Uthman and then Ali, and then they say, and that the 10 from the who are given glad tidings for the Jannah, and the people who were from the Muhajirin were better than the Ansar, and the people who entered Islam before the Fath of Mecca were better than the ones who entered in Islam after the Fath of Mecca. So we see from all this that this term Muhajirin had a specific place in Islam, and the term Ansar had a specific place in Islam, and it's mentioned in the Quran. It came from above the 7 seven heavens or the seven skies that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed these verses. But despite this, when it came to having some sort of division that, oh, the muhajirin come because help the person who's a muhajir, and oh, ansar come help the person who's from the ansar, the Prophet ﷺ called this something that was putrid or filthy or disgusting or whatever, because it had this division. So then what would we say about something that didn't come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, and it didn't come from the Prophet ﷺ in the Sunnah? It came from some guy who happened to be, he started a town, and another guy started another town, and then now we hate each other because of this guy started another town. Something like that. Or the British came and they divided up our land now, so the guy who's on the other side of the river, I hate him because he's from the other side of the river, and the Philistines hate the Jordanians, and the Jordanians hate the Philistines, and the Suris hate the Lebanese, and this and that, and Pakistanis hate Indians, and on and on and on. And who did this? First of all, it's not from the Shara, so it's done. After that, there should be no discussion about it. But not only that, it didn't even come from Muslimin. But then people start making their wilayah based upon these things. And they'll love the Muslim who's from this country more than they'll love the Muslim who's from another country. And they'll hate the kafir who's from my country less than I'll hate the kafir from the other country. And sometimes even you'll see it's disgusting that they'll love the kafir from my country more than they'll love the Muslim from the other country. So they start making these ties based upon, it's something that's, not only is it baseless, the division in and of itself, the asl of it or the basis of it is something disgusting, that that kuffar took over Muslim lands and they started dividing it up, and now all of a sudden people are following these things. Or you'll see them that they'll come, many Muslimin will come to this country, and then they'll start, all of a sudden they'll start, loving kuffar who are Canadians, because I got my citizenship now, and now I'm a Canadian, and we're all Canadians, and we gotta love it. And you think, well, you weren't even born here. You start seeing these ties, and you think, how could someone who just even read the Quran even think like this? But then you see, it's like that, and these people, they'll start giving lessons and running masajid and this and that, and you think, it makes you sick, but you can't do anything about it, and you complain to Allah only, because it gets to the point where you think these people are so far gone that there's nothing else to do. And I'm sure, especially in the last month or two, I know for a fact a lot of you have felt that way about certain issues and that, but Allah al-Musta'an, you don't even know what to say about it. So this is just a little bit just to talk about the issue of wilayah, and where does the wilayah come from, and what is it based upon, and what shouldn't it be based upon. And inshallah we'll get more, when we get into other topics about what's the ruling on different types of wilayah, and is this considered actually allegiance or not, and is this considered something that is allowed with a Muslim, with a non-Muslim or not, and this is, that will come later on inshallah if you can be patient, but this is just kind of laying the groundwork to understand of what are the ties based upon, and why are they based upon that, and what shouldn't they be based upon, and why they shouldn't be based upon that. So that's the third point, and we can move on to the fourth unless you guys want to stop now.
Where did half hour?
So, I don't know. It's up to you guys.
Half hour.
Yeah?
Keep going.
Okay. Fine. All right, so the fourth, and this one will be a little bit shorter, so if you, inshallah, if you guys are getting impatient. The fourth thing that is mentioned here is making takfir, or declaring to be non-Muslim the people who leave Tawheed. So just the first, something just to talk about before we get into this topic is the idea of, or the phrase here used is takfir. So this is something that people probably hear very often, and it creates something in their heart, or they feel uncomfortable when they hear it. And this is, it's a product of many factors that have come about, and things that have gone on, in the Ummah in the last, say, maybe 60 years, and the way that this phrase is used by certain groups to, I guess you could say, scare people away from certain aspects of Tawheed. Because in and of itself, what does takfir mean? Means saying someone isn't Muslim. That's all takfir means. So from this we can see that it's not a good word, and it's not a bad word. If some guy comes up and he says, "Oh, hi, I'm Jewish," and you say, "Oh, he's not Muslim," that's takfir. No one would say, you're crazy to say that. Everyone would accept that. If you see the priest and you say, "Oh, he's not Muslim," this is something this is takfir. So in and of itself, this word isn't something good and it's not something bad. It's just the calling someone non-Muslim. At the same time, if someone walks in here and sees the row of Muslimin praying and he says these people are all kuffar, this is also takfir. no one would say that that's something acceptable either. Calling a Muslim who's confirmed as being Muslim, calling him to be or calling him a kafir is something that's it's a very it's a sinful thing, and it's a very grave matter to do. But at the same time, not calling kuffar is also something that's very a grave thing. So if you see a kafir and say, oh, it's okay, you can call him a Muslim, or I'm going to he'll enter Jannah, or so on the other side, there's just as dangerous things that come from the opposite aspect of this issue of takfir. So just be careful when you hear that word, that it's not being used in a way that is just a means to scare you away from certain aspects of tawheed. Obviously, if someone doesn't do anything that takes them out of Islam, we can't call him a kafir, and it would be haram upon us to do that, and we have to give him his rights of Islam and all of these things. But at the same time, you'll find people who will say, if you call a Jew or a Christian or someone who's Durzi or someone who's a Rafidi or anything you say, well, this guy's not Muslim, they'll freak out and they say, oh, he's making takfir and how he's doing this and he's doing that, and you say, you know what? What else am I going to do? I'm not going to call him a Muslim. He's obviously not a Muslim. He's worshipping Ali. He's worshipping Al-Hakim bi Amrillah, or he's making tawaf on these graves, and he doesn't even call himself a Muslim to begin with. How am I not going to call him a kafir? How am I going to call him a Muslim? So don't let that fear that people will try to use that word to push you away from aspects of tawheed, but also don't fall into the other side, of taking people who are Muslim out of Islam. So inshallah, by learning what is actually Islam and what is actually kufr and shirk, this is the best defense from falling into these aspects. So you don't let your emotions take over. You look, okay, what does the Quran and Sunnah say? Okay, these are Muslims. I'm not going to I'll obviously give them the rights of Islam and treat them as Muslimin. And these aren't Muslims. I'm not going to call them Muslimin, and I'm going to call them what they are, which is disbelievers. So the best defense isn't to let your emotions take over, or your fear, or your zeal to follow Islam, that it starts making you call people who are maybe sinners to leave Islam. So inshallah, that's just kind of a introduction or some points I wanted to mention before, because there is this tendency that when that word is mentioned, everyone kind of starts to run away. But inshallah, you'll see that it shouldn't be looked at that way. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet ﷺ to say, oh, you disbelievers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet ﷺ to call them disbelievers, and they were Quraysh. So calling someone a non-Muslim isn't a problem, as long as they're a non-Muslim. If they're a Muslim, then it's an issue. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَجَعَلَ لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا لِيُضِلَّ عَنْ سَبِيلِهِ قُلْ تَمَتَّعْ بِكُفْرِكَ قَلِيلًا إِنَّكَ مِنْ أَصْحَابِ النَّارِ. And they set up rivals to Allah or in their worship in order to mislead others from His path. Say, take pleasure in your kufr for a while, surely you are the denizens of the fire. And this verse is from Surah Al-Zumar, verse 8. So here we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared non-Muslims to be non-Muslims or kuffar, and He declared acts of kufr to be acts of kufr. So there's no danger in calling something what it is. If something is this, there's no problem in calling the thing that. I mean, all you're doing is stating something that's part of reality. And this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. Say, O you disbelievers, or O you non-Muslims, or O you kuffar. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to address them in that way. And this is something that I actually heard people say, and I saw someone get in an argument one time with someone, that he said something about some people, and he said, oh, they're kuffar. And this guy freaked out, and he said, you can't call them kuffar. And then he said, well, they're not Muslim. And he said, no, they're not Muslim, but there's a difference between saying you're not Muslim and saying you're a kafir. And you think, well, like where are you getting this stuff? You think this is,
Like once I called a Christian like a kafir, and like, no, you shouldn't call him kafir, you should call him Ahl al-Kitab.
So that's the kind of stuff. And then when you argue against that, they'll say, well, no, didn't Allah call them Ahl al-Kitab? And you'll say, yes. But you know what? Where is this leading? This is leading to, they're entering Jannah. This is where it opens up a door that, like sometimes you think technically there might be something right in what they're saying, but there's also a part missing, which they're Ahl Kitab and they're kuffar. they're not Muslims, so there's only two. You're either Muslim or a kafir. There's no third. Even munafiqeen, they're kuffar. and fusaq, technically they're Muslims, so all these other categories fall under these two categories. But yeah, they'll say things like that, where there is some truth, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did call them Ahl Kitab, but are they kuffar or Muslimin? So I mean, they're kuffar, so they're, you'll hear things like this and you think, something's not right here, and this is gonna go, you're trying to lead me down a road that, isn't gonna be a good road to go down.
Sorry, what verse was this one from Surah Al-Zumar?
8.
Verse 8. And couldn't we say also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of orders us in this ayah to make takfir of them? Like he says, take pleasure in your kufr for a while.
Yeah, he's saying
say that. He's commanding us to say this.
Yeah, so if something is an act of kufr, we should call it an act of kufr. We shouldn't dance around the issue and try to say, it's not like that, or maybe there's this, or what do you say about that? I mean, if it's kufr, it's kufr. People need to know that. Mm-hmm. If someone's not Muslim, we don't do like we talked a little bit last week about this idea of what do you call it? Bringing together the Abrahamic faiths and stuff, and we talked a bit about how Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam was the first one to call us Muslims, and now we're trying to bring people who he kind of argued against, or he argued against their concepts of shirk. Now we're trying to bring them and say, we're all from the same person, so we're all good. So this idea that so they're Jews and they say they believe in Ibrahim in their own way, which it's not the correct belief, because if it was, they would have entered Islam. And same thing with the Christians. Then by not openly saying this stuff, first of all, we're not doing ourselves any good, because we're not openly declaring our Islam, and we're not openly declaring something that's wrong to be wrong, and we're also not doing them any favors either. If we're really concerned about making da'wah to people, why are we telling them, oh no, we're all from the same thing and it's all good, and we're all we'll have meetings together, and then they're going to say, well, if we're so alike, why would we change then? Why don't you come to us then? Or why don't we just all stay how we are, because the state that we're in now really isn't that big of a deal. So so we're not even doing them any favors. So this idea that it's just for da'wah, it's not for da'wah at all. It's because I don't even know what it's for, but it's not for da'wah, because if it was for da'wah, you don't go to someone and say you want them to stop doing something, so you tell them it's good. No one would ever say that. You want your kid to stop doing something, you don't go, good job, keep doing that. You say, don't do that. This is wrong to do, stop doing it. Same thing with this. So this idea, it's for da'wah. If it was for da'wah, tell them, look, we're Muslimin, we believe you're on batil, here's why. And depending on who it is, you would go to them in a different manner. Like if it's someone who, who's very academic, you might, deal with them in an academic way. If it's someone who, who's very spiritual, you might deal with them. But in the end, this idea that not bringing up anything because it's going to make them mad and then they're going to run away. So in the end, they still didn't enter Islam.
So he's trying to say, obviously, people shouldn't comfort another deen to give them dollars, right?
No, if you see, if you see something like, say, what, we believe this stuff like you do, except it was changed, and originally the message was like this, and if you'll see that up until from the time of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam until the time of Isa, there's no real mention of the Son of God. There's only mention of Allah. So we believe that this was something that was distorted in that, and but throughout the history of the Anbiya, we see that worshipping Allah is something that's always there. Not taking graven images is something that's there. These types of things, and then you say, and then you go to them from that. So you clarify, if you want to mention what's correct in their religion, but then point out the wrong too. But what's the point of just saying, oh yeah, it's we believe that God created Earth too. Bye. And in the end, what did you do for them? Yeah. Or they say, yeah, that's another thing. We just have passed this season. They'll say Merry Christmas. So you're essentially condoning what the people are doing, but then they'll say, it's for da'wah. Do you think when someone goes into your store and you're playing Christmas music, they go, this guy, he's listening to Christmas music, I'm going to follow his religion? No one thinks that. First of all, they think, this guy's. They don't even think about it. First of all, and then if they do care, they're going to see this guy's. He's bringing himself down, and he's becoming more Canadian, or he's leaving his own religion. They're not going, he put on this music, let's follow his religion now. So these are the type of things, inshallah, we'll get into more when we talk about specific acts and beliefs and that. But these are just some of the kind of the ridiculous things that you might see and hear through your daily life, when you deal with Muslimin in the masajid, or especially ones who, for whatever reason are trying to do good and they have good intentions, but they really just don't have knowledge behind what they're doing. So they're kind of, they're trying to do good, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, guide them to the right way to do this good, but, they haven't really, come up with enough knowledge of what they're doing. So they're kind of doing themselves, a misservice, and, everyone else who they're trying to help. And the last thing that just on this point, or the last verse, is that we can say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَمَاذَا بَعْدَ الْحَقِّ إِلَّا الضَّلَالِ, or and what is after the truth except falsehood. So we know that anything that's not the truth is falsehood.
What surah is that?
That's Surah Yunus, verse 32. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defined things that they're either true or they're false. So this idea, if we say that, if we want to say that something isn't wrong, then we're saying that it's the truth. We can't say that, they might say, well, you can't say that they're wrong, or you can't say that they're this, or you can't say that they're that. If there's only two categories, and you say, well, it's not part of this category, you're putting them in the other category, and there's no way getting away from that. So we can understand from this, there's either Muslim or there's a non-Muslim. There's nothing in between. And there's either truth or falsehood. Or there's either, haqq or dalal, or haqq or batil. So there's no third category. So this idea that we're not going to, we won't say that he's a Muslim, but we won't also call him a kafir. We'll say he's not Muslim. Well, you're putting him into one of these categories either way.
But
so,
just a question.
Yeah.
Sin doesn't take someone out of Islam. Like, I'm talking major sins, zina.
No, major sins don't. No.
So he's still a Muslim.
He would still be Muslim. His iman would be lower for sure.
Okay, but he's still a Muslim.
But he's still a Muslim, yeah.
You don't declare takfir of
No.
someone. Okay.
No.
Takfir is only declared once they do kufr.
Something of kufr, yeah.
If that major sin is kufr,
Yeah.
then you would.
If he does shirk, if he does something that's kufr.
That's not tawheed, would take him like
Right.
worshipping someone besides Allah, or
Yeah.
tawaf around
Something like, yeah.
Like, yeah. Okay.
So the aspect, something that takes you out of Islam, then we it would remove you from Islam,
Like the stuff we talked about.
Sheikh, what
some of
about
the stuff.
salat? As-salat.
Yeah.
Is it-
They go out from Islam,
Not praying, you mean?
yeah?
Inshallah, we'll get into that about the ikhtilaf from the ulama about that after, in a different lesson, inshallah.
And, how about somebody they believe in another prophet after Muhammad alayhi salam? Is that kufr?
Yeah.
It's for sure it's kufr, yeah.
Yeah, of course, right?
Yeah.
What verse was it? Okay, thanks.
So then just some points about the, someone might say, well, really, yes, we don't say they're right, but what is the point, or what is the point of saying that they're not Muslim? What do we get out of that? Or, sure, I say that if someone worships Ali, or if they worship one of the Imams of the Rafida, or he says there's a prophet after the Prophet ﷺ, or he says there's a book after the Quran, if he does any of these things, yes, it's kufr, but what is the point of me calling him a kafir? What do I get out of that? Or, so what if I say, I say the action is kufr by him, I don't know, I'm not going to talk about him. I'm not going to say anything about him, and he's just left up to Allah. This is an issue that has been talked about, from the time of the Salaf. And what they call this issue is not declaring someone who's clearly a disbeliever. To be a disbeliever makes that person a disbeliever. So what does that mean? If someone walks in here now and he does something that's clear kufr, he, like we talked about last week, like he puts a statue in front of the rose so everyone's going to worship it. Or he stands up and he swears at Allah, or he throws the Quran on the ground and then tries to urinate on it. Any of these types of things, and we'll go into other things as well. If someone came now and said, this is an act of kufr, but I'm not going to call him I can't call him a kafir, and it's not allowed, and I can't say anything like that. The scholars from the time of the Salaf would say that if you won't call him a kafir, then you yourself are a kafir. And what they mean by that is that because this person has done something and they've left Islam, if you're not going to declare that he's actually left Islam and you're going to continue to call him a Muslim, then you're saying that someone can be Muslim and still do these acts. So this is what they mean by it. So you've done something, or you're not, essentially you're rejecting part of the Quran is what they say. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, to be a Muslim you need to do this, or the Prophet ﷺ made something obligatory upon you to be Muslim, and then someone won't do that, but you'll say, well, he's still a Muslim. You're saying, well, you know what, I'm not accepting this verse, or I'm not accepting this this hadith. Yeah.
Okay, so at school, like, we have this prayer room. It's
Yeah.
like a multi-faith room.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, like, the Rawafid, they walk in, and they put the hajar, and
Yeah, yeah.
they do the acts of, like, I don't know where they get that prayer from.
Yeah.
No one says anything. And, like, sometimes I feel like just talking to them or throwing the rocks over.
Yeah.
I'm scared I'm gonna start a fitna. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and every time I tell someone like we should do something, they tell us, well, at the end, this is a multi-faith room, so they don't have to pray. This is not a masjid.
Yeah, yeah.
And second of all, like, we don't want to start a fitna. We
Yeah.
don't want to. So, like, what do we do? Do we
For
talk to them?
For that, I mean, if you think you can make da'wah to them, then you should. But at the same time, this wouldn't come into this issue. This issue would come in now if, say, you saw a guy, and you heard him making dua to Ali, or to Fatima, or Hassan, or Hussein, and then you said, but he's still Muslim. This doesn't take him out of Islam. This is your problem now. Because you're saying someone can be a Muslim and they still do these things. This is when it becomes a problem. But about making da'wah to them and can you stop them from doing their kufr in the place? Do you have control? I mean, that's a different issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
I threw all the stones, everything.
Yeah.
I went to the room.
If you can, I mean, that's something very
I
good.
swear I did.
Yeah. If you can, that's something, that you should
So,
do.
but if you've seen someone making dua to Ali or
Yeah.
someone like
First thing I'm
that,
gonna do.
and then you don't call them a kafir, or then you just say that you're a kafir yourself? If you
It
still
doesn't
call
mean
them-
you have to openly say every time you walk by someone and they're doing something that's kufr, you say you're a kafir, you're a kafir. That doesn't it means that you.
No, if you say, oh no, he's still Muslim, then aren't
That's
you
the
a kafir
problem.
yourself? If you say that,
If what he's doing is clear kufr,
Yeah.
and he's clear that he's not a Muslim, and you know that, and all the things are there, then that's
like
the
if
problem.
if a Muslim is making sujood to someone,
Yeah,
to a person,
yeah.
and then somebody's, no, he's still Muslim,
That's
then
the problem
You
then.
yourself are a kafir for saying that, no?
Generally, yeah. I mean, we'll get into the details, but in general, that's the rule.
Okay.
Sorry.
Specific people, we'll get into that in another time, about calling someone, but that's the rule in general.
Okay, what would you be your reply to somebody who says, like you said, okay, they're kuffar, but what would I get out of calling them that?
We get about calling them that. We would say this is part of our deen. Knowing what's truth and what's falsehood, telling people what's truth and what's falsehood, telling people if they're on the truth or not, when we know they're not on the truth.
And then would you
Declaring something, you're no longer a Muslim because telling that to them so they know, telling that to them so other people see, I can't act like this guy and still be a Muslim. All these things, this is the reason why. If everyone, anyone walked in and did whatever they want and no one ever said anything, imagine some guy now, he put a statue, because this is a very clear example, put a statue and no one said anything. They just left him. They said, oh yeah, he's still Muslim. Well, some other guy who just walked in is going, oh, I guess you can do this stuff and be Muslim. There's no problem with it. And this doesn't, the point of it is to show those people what they are, hopefully that they'll turn away from it, to show other people what they are so they won't fall into it, and even in the end just to keep your Islam clear to yourself that this is something that we reject and something that we'll never accept as Muslimin. So those are the benefits of it.
But these issues should be clear more.
Yeah. This
the
is
more
all
you
just
get
a very,
into
very
it,
basic to understand that if something's not Islam, you have to say it's not
Yeah.
Islam. If someone's not Muslim, you have to say they're not Muslim.
Yeah.
That's the basic point of this.
I was calling to
Finish just about this rule, just to know that this isn't a matter that there's a consensus upon. And we talked, for those who were in the fiqh lesson, that ijma' we know is a hujjah. So if the ummah or the scholars of the ummah agree on something, then we know that it's something that's correct, and we know that it's a hujjah, and we know that it has to be followed. So this idea that taking something or finding someone who's not Muslim or having someone who's not Muslim and saying he's not Muslim, that's obligatory on us, and to clarify, if someone is known to us to be not Muslim, we can't call him Muslim, and the opposite as well. This is a matter there's a consensus upon. And this rule is from the time of the Salaf. One of the quotes that we can mention is Al-Qadi Iyad, who was from the major of the scholars of the Maliki madhab, that he talked about some issues that there's ijma' that is kufr. So, worshipping someone other than Allah and so on. He talked about some of these issues and he said, وَلِهَذَا نُكَفِّرُ مَنْ دَانَ بِغَيْرِ مِلَّةِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ مِنَ الْمِلَلِ أو توقف منهم أو شك أو صحح مذهبهم وإن أظهر الإسلام واعتقد إبطال كل مذهب سواه فهو كافر بإظهار ما أظهر من خلاف ذلك. Or Al-Qadi Iyad, he said, and due to this, we declare to be a kafir anyone who follows a religion other than the millah of the Muslimin, or he withholds regarding them. So meaning he won't declare people who don't follow Islam, he won't call them kuffar, or he doubts about it, or he declares their madhab to be correct. So we see here that he considers that if you say that their madhab or their deen is correct, or if you doubt whether it's correct or not, or if you just even withhold calling it wrong, that these are all the same. And he said, even if he openly displays Islam and believes in it, so if he prays and pays zakat and he says La ilaha illallah and he actually believes in it, even saying these things, like say if you believe in Islam and you show Islam and practice it, but you say Christianity is correct, or you won't say that it's wrong, then he says, then this person is a kafir due to what he displays that contradicts it. So he showed something that contradicts the Islam, which means that Islam, from the condition of correct Islam, or if you know what Islam is correctly, then you'll say everything other than Islam is batil. So when you say, yes, I believe in Islam and I follow it, but I'm not going to call the other thing batil, then they say, well, this is, you've done something that clearly contradicts what you've said, and you're not Muslim. And this is a matter of ijma'. Sulaiman ibn Abdullah ibn Muhammad ibn Abdil-Wahhab, he said, إن كان شاكا في كفرهم أو جاهلا بكفرهم بينت له الأدلة من كتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم على كفرهم فإن شك بعد ذلك وتردد فإنه كافر بإجماع العلماء على أن من شك في كفر الكفار فهو كافر. Or Sulaiman ibn Abdullah, he said, if he doubts the kufr or their kufr, or he is ignorant of it, you clarify to him the evidence from the book of Allah and the sunnah of his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam concerning their kufr. Then if he doubts after that, or he hesitates, then he is a disbeliever or a kafir according to the consensus or the ijma' of the ulama, that whoever doubts the kufr of the kuffar, he himself is a kafir. So if someone doubts that the Christians are kuffar, then this person himself with the doubt, he's also a disbeliever. And what does that go back to? It goes back to declaring, if you know Islam is correct, and you know that Christianity contradicts Islam from its basis with shirk and rejection of the Prophet ﷺ and all of the other aspects of kufr of it, but then you won't call it kufr, and you'll say, I'm not really sure whether this is wrong or not, or whether this is kufr or not. This shows that you weren't sure of Islam then. There's something's missing there that means that you're not Muslim. So this is the point of what he's saying. And we see here that he mentioned that this is a matter of consensus, or a matter of ijma'. And the ijma' as well, just because some people might say, this is something only people nowadays say, or it was only from the time of Muhammad ibn Abdil-Wahhab, or they'll say it was only from the time of Ibn Taymiyyah. So some of them will go this far back and say these things. But we'll see that even Muhammad ibn Sahnun, who was from the major Imams of the Malikiyah, and he died in the beginning of the 3rd century. So this was very, very early on, and he mentioned that there's ijma', that whoever says that the Quran is created, and this isn't, and we'll get into this issue, but whoever says that one of the attributes of Allah is a creation, then he's a disbeliever, and whoever doubts in his disbelief, he's also a disbeliever. So so the point here is not about the creation of the Quran. We'll get into that, but the point is that even on this issue, which wasn't well known to everyone until later on, the scholars as far back as the beginning of the 3rd century and even earlier than this held this rule to be correct. That if someone is clearly non-Muslim, then you need to say that he's non-Muslim. You can't beat around the bush, or you can't say he's Muslim, or he's we don't want to call him a something like that. This is something from Islam, and this was also, this ijma' or this consensus was also mentioned by Abu al-Hussein al-Malatai al-Shafi'i, and he died in the beginning of the 4th century. So this was also another person the end of the 4th century, and this is another person who mentioned the consensus. So we have Muhammad ibn Sahnun from the Malikis, we have Sulaiman ibn Abdullah, who's a Hanbali, and he was from the later scholars, and we have al-Malatai, who was from the Shafi'i scholars. All these people mentioning the consensus. From the earlier scholars, yeah. It's from he died 377 Hijri. And Ibn Taymiyyah also mentioned this a lot. He has his book, Sarab al-Maslul, which is all talking about the ruling on someone who swears at the Prophet ﷺ. He talked about these issues a lot, aspects of Iman and Kufr. So he also mentioned that there's a consensus on this as well. This is where, inshallah,